Hey,
Hi.
hi. So
Hi.
good to see you.
Okay. As long as I'm hearable, uh, I'm just gonna ask people to mute just because not because, just because I have a hard time, uh, focusing. I'm sorry. Yay. Okay. I am going to share something that has some personal stories in it, um, but it's for thinking. I'm an ethics major, so I like to. I I went to school and I like to learn about ethics. And I know you can use like an ethics major for things like becoming a lawyer or like bioethics and things like that. But I wanted to use it for writing stories and art. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so this is called Portraits of Choice. Cats do not obey, or do they? Do cats have a primal failsafe in their choice making will that humans have forgotten? Have human beings forgotten the roots of obedient free will? I will ask those questions again at the end to let you decide what this has to do with cats. First, I'm going to say some words. Just allow your mind to call up feelings and images and let them go. Free will, child, war, drafted, cats, peace, adult, free choice, dogs, obedience, violence, time. This speech will not follow a pattern of introduction, middle, and conclusion. It's not persuasive. It's not an argument. It isn't even a position. It's just a progression of three portraits, stories strung together, the single thread as theme and question for your reflection. Do human beings have a failsafe in our human conscious will? A failsafe is a sort of default. It's like a backup plan or backup system. It involves incorporating some feature for automatically counteracting the effect of an anticipated possible source of failure. In engineering, a failsafe is a system designed to remain safe in the event of a failure. It inherently responds in a way that will cause minimal or no harm to other parts of the design, to the environment, or to people. Examples are electronic locks in cars, traffic lights designed to blink red if their controller goes down, air brakes in trains, and flight control computers designed to detect another computer in the airplane that might be suffering from insanity during the flight, meaning it appears to be dysfunctional due to damage, and thus the airplane can default to a backup computer. In this series of portraits, I'm adding a simple variation to the theme. Does a human being have a failsafe in their human will, a default or a backup system it falls back on when an external authority figure imposes a dysfunctional choice upon them? Before I begin, I can give you two examples from popular culture, although for the sake of time, I will not return to them. The first example for examining free will would be the concept of the Manchurian Candidate. The name comes from a 1959 political thriller in which the son of a prominent U.S. political family is brainwashed into being an unwitting assassin for a communist conspiracy. The plot unravels as Korean War veteran returns home, a decorated war hero, but we discover that he was actually captured, brainwashed, and given false memories by the Chinese. A Manchurian Candidate, for those who know the reference, is a term now referred to describe a person who has unknowingly or unwittingly been convinced to act to benefit some interest. Another example of a person's free will being co-opted is Sophie's Choice, a 1982 American drama film directed by Alan Pakula, adapted from William Styron's novel. In this plot, Sophie reveals through her arrival at Auschwitz that she was forced to choose which one of her two children would be gassed and which one would proceed to a labor camp. To avoid having both children killed, she chose her son to be sent to the children's camp and her daughter to be sent to her death. Today, the term Sophie's choice refers to a choice where every alternative has significant negative consequences. The angle I'm researching is in the area of responsibility, not whether the person is responsible for the act committed when their free will has been co-opted, but whether or not the person is personally, morally responsible for the consequences of their choice. For authenticity's sake, I chose to paint these three portraits of people I know living actual events I know to have actually happened. Each one of these portraits is a description of a character who has the possibility to engage in a sort of inner failsafe, an on-off switch inside the will, a light switch of sorts that can instinctively engage a feature to counteract the effect of an anticipated source of failure, keeping their will safe from harm to itself or doing harm to others or the environment. In the portraits I will draw for you, the source of failure comes from the imposed choice of a commanding officer or external authority. Portrait 1. A homeless woman walking down a street in a middle-class neighborhood during the coldest hours of the early morning, an hour before sunrise, picks up a branch, a few inches shorter than her 5-foot frame, and starts to pace herself with it. It's her new walking stick. The porches in the neighborhood have wicker chairs and welcome mats, ashtrays with half-smoked cigarettes. She's visited them all, hoping for food, but to keep warm, she must keep moving. Shuffling along, she has not seen any movement for the last hour. All is quiet in the surreal pre-dawn 4 a.m. light, and here, right here, where the street lamps are still deciding whether to quit for the night, she sees a huge white mass of fur and teeth hurtling towards her, and at the same time, she sees a shadow of a human in the distance and realizes that what is attacking her is a dog, seconds before it leaps for her throat. Portrait 2. The sharp point of the compass tears the draftsman's map as he finishes drawing the circles to indicate targets for the next wave of bombs on the Cambodia military grid for the U.S. Air Force. At that exact instant, the commanding officer opens the door to the drafting room with the newest recruits and notices the rings of the young man's circles and says, "What color are these quadrants?" The man hesitates and says, "Red. This is a highly populated area." The commander barks, "Are you colorblind? It's green. You obviously can't see the forest for the trees. We are decimating armies, not paper supplies." 6 weeks later, the young draftsman is diagnosed with and discharged from the Air Force with a mental health condition. To this very day, he cannot draw concentric circles without choking back memories of his complicity in the strategic murder of strangers, just shadows of red grid patterns on paper. Portrait 3. A 7-year-old girl eating dinner with her sister and her stepdad reaches for the bag of chips to pull them to her side of the table, and as they spill onto the floor, she realizes the bag has been opened at the bottom instead of the top. The stepdad is outraged. The two girls are shuttled to the couch, and the lecture from stepdad stretches on for hours towards midnight. These sudden furies and lectures from stepdad were pretty common, and the child knew that spilling of chips wasn't a big deal. She knew that she had only known this man since she was 6 years old. She knew he beat up her mom and made fun of her sister and made her sister cry almost every day. During the lecture, he was repeating a new word over and over again, and it was the word respect. So she immediately attached the new word to what was happening. Respect means following orders from a person who did all kinds of things you did not like and would never do yourself. End of 3 portraits. In the first portrait, the homeless woman is being attacked by an animal that does not have a failsafe. In the event that the man in the shadows has chosen to order the dog to attack a defenseless stranger, the dog is not falling back on its own instinct, which for most domesticated animals is to defend their master when their master is endangered or to defend their territory or their own young. In this instance, the woman was not attacking the man in the distance, nor was she a threat to the dog's puppies, and she was walking in a public street. The dog was following orders that contradicted, we must assume, the dog's innate or instinctual set of rules. It had no fail-safe in its will in the event of the failure of the commanding officer, in this case its owner, to make a logical decision. In the second portrait, the man has made a choice to enter a career which involves following the will of another. The choices of the U.S. military during its conflict with Vietnam. And it draws a picture of what can happen when the man comes to a realization that the will, choices, and actions he has chosen to obey contradict his own. In my long years of study of the nature of PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome disorder, I believe that a reactive mental health condition that occurs in instances of coercing the will to act in contradiction with its inherent system is kind of fail-safe of the human will. Unlike the dog in the first scenario, this man was able to detect the insanity of the dysfunctional value in the damaged system, which were triggered by the orders of the commanding officer, and as a result, he fail-safed into his original backup mode, which for him was his entire value system that he had had for his life up to that point. The third portrait is more of an origin story than a portrait. The child was at a stage in child development when her basic value system and experience with what was right or wrong could not be fooled by the value system that contradicted her already developed will. The third portrait of the child is simply an invitation to ask ourselves some intriguing questions. Does the human will have a fail-safe? If so, how did our original fail-safe form? Did influences in our childhood or adulthood affect which violations would trigger it? Cats do not obey. Or do they? Do cats have a primal failsafe in their choice-making will? We have forgotten. Have human beings forgotten the roots of obedient free will? The end.
Oh, yay! There we go. Just turned mute off. Big round of applause for Amiella.